But thanks a lot for calling.
I'm not putting up with that shit.
It's I appreciate the fact that people call and want to share. We let you go on for quite a little while, although this isn't the show to call in and preach. If you really think that you've got some new aspect of religion that we haven't considered or hasn't come across, please call in and share it. If you think you have actual evidence that supports what you believe, please call in and share. But if you're calling in to say, this is what I believe, and your only justification is faith, there's no point. We can't argue against that. If you say, I believe it, and I don't have a justification, and it just feels right in my heart, and I love Jesus, and he loves me, or whatever God you happen to pick, great, good for you. Until you can actually demonstrate it to somebody else by evidence or argument or anything reasonable, it's just another claim. It's no different than somebody who's calling in to tell me about Bigfoot. It's just as silly. Bigfoot, Santa Claus, fairies, trolls, ogres, God. Yes, that includes Yahweh, Jesus, Vishnu, Krishna. I don't care which one. Unless you can actually, if you're making claims about the supernatural, come with a bit more than I believe it. And this nonsense about, those who aren't believers just can't see the truth of God. I've seen people, intelligent people. We talked about the gentleman from the Human Genome Project, who's a renowned scientist, or at least a scientist working on that project, and has become an evangelical Christian. And one of the things, apart from the anthropic principle of the cosmological argument, this argument that the universe is fine-tuned for humans as if it knew we were coming, and therefore there's a God. In addition to that, one of the things that convinced him was he was out on a walk or a bike ride or whatever, and he came to a waterfall. And the waterfall was divided into 3 sections. And in his mind, that represented the Trinity, and that was the epiphany moment that converted him. Now, if you've got a rational scientific mind, and you're that easily convinced, I got a couple magic tricks I can show you sometime, and you can start paying your tithe to me, because it's far more impressive than a waterfall divided in thirds. The fact that religious people seem to want to compartmentalize their beliefs, keep it separate, you can't look at it with a skeptical eye, you can't critically examine these beliefs, they transcend nature and explanations. Good for you. Some of us expect a bit more than just the say-so of an old book, or somebody standing at a pulpit, or somebody who happens to say something that feels good to you. Because in general, apart from inheriting our religious beliefs from our parents, most people come to the religious belief that feels best to them. And that's why you've got 1,000 denominations of Christians all picking and choosing whichever portions happen to feel right for them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was clear to our viewers, but our last caller told the call screener that what he wanted to talk about was how non-Christians can't understand the Bible.
Yeah.
Right? That was supposed to be the purpose of his call. And I think what really annoys me when Christians try to play that card, you can't understand us until you're one of us card, is that they then turn around and have these beliefs about us that we are horrible people that deserve to be tortured forever, right? I'm sorry, if you're going to go around saying that I deserve something like that, I am darn well going to insist that you make your point. Right? That you prove your case. You are not going to get off the hook with a silly little, mind game like, our religion is so our magical holy book is so special that unless you're one of us, you can't understand it. It's not our fault you worship a God who's not able to write a book that's understandable by everybody, if that's what you're trying to say. Doesn't change the damn thing. We are sitting here being told by folks like you that we deserve eternal torture. Okay, you're not getting off the hook with silly little games like that. If you call our show, we expect you to back up your claims.
Yeah, there's a problem with that whole thing too. If you can't understand it until you're one of us, because if you can't understand it until you're a Christian, then what exactly is it that's supposed to be able to convince you to become a Christian in the first place?
Nothing. You're supposed to just believe.
Yeah, you're supposed to just make the blind faith jump, and then it'll all make sense to you. It's just, there's all kinds of levels of silliness to some of this. And, I don't necessarily mean to be insulting to everybody, because I realize there's some people out there who have perfectly reasonable beliefs or reasonable perspectives on most things. They just have a few, clinging supernatural notions behind those beliefs. And
No.
I wish they could get beyond that, but they're not the people who are trying to,
And they're generally not the people going
push.
around slandering us.
Yeah.
So.
What if I was to sit here and say that instead of being an atheist, I actually believe in some God who's determined that anybody with blonde hair is going to be tortured forever. Nothing you can do about it. Wouldn't I just, obviously we look at that and say that's immoral. Therefore, that God's position is immoral. And I'm immoral for following that God. I'm immoral for following that belief, whether there's a God behind it or not. This notion that I can somehow say, well, this is the author of morality and he's exempt from it. I mean, it's absurd. Which is why we keep bringing up the thing about stoning unruly children. If you don't pick and choose, you're supposed to take your kids out to the edge of town if they're unruly and stone them to death. Every decent person in modern society would recognize and admit, except for those who think that I'm trying to trick them, that is an immoral action, that we don't need to kill unruly children. And even if we did, stoning in particular is a very nasty way to kill somebody. I mean, we don't even put criminals, murderers to death, in that way. We got injections or something else. But everybody would reject that. And yet when it comes time to acknowledge that if your Bible is true, and that is God's sense of morality, then you are rejecting God's sense of morality, and you are rejecting the idea that this God could have come up with something that's such an abomination, and they just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
It must, there's we can't understand it. God works in mysterious. No, the God of the Old Testament is a prick. He is a little egomaniac who runs around killing people. I've picked out my favorite clan, and we're going to make sure that they conquer the world. And we're going to, oh, by the way, when you go over there and kill all those people, kill all the men, kill all the boys, kill all the women who have known men, but keep all the young virgin girls for yourself. But you have to turn a portion of them over to the church. I mean, I love they call in and, oh, that was the Old Testament. That was the Old Testament. Whose name is mentioned more times in the New Testament than anybody else's? Moses. And Jesus refers to Moses. There's a reason why your Bible comes with an Old Testament and New Testament. You can't have the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy in the New Testament if you shrug it away. So it's dishonest for Christians to say, oh, but that was the Old Testament. And especially if they're going to be foisting up Ten Commandments monuments and crap.